There's lots of other things that I could say about it and I could think about, but I think those are two things that I found very helpful and rejuvenating during this time. And I think hopefully there are things that we can all sort of do in our daily lives. Other things that Sabbatical offers the chance to sort of relearn or refocus on resting, on seeing things anew, on just being, and then not that your whole life then needs to be that kind of rest or, but then you incorporate it in small chunks throughout your ordinary daily life once you're back into your routines and your rhythms. And I really found that to be something that I've experienced as I came back to Midvale after the summer. It was really a time where I continue to feel energized and also you come back and you see things differently because you don't take them for granted anymore. You also see things differently because you haven't seen them for quite a while. That's when you notice that. And also reminds you that there are the importance of taking those moments to rest and allow yourself to refocus. So those are some of the things that I was thinking about this picture. Does anyone know where that picture is from? Take a guess. Not the Arboretum, a little bit farther away. Close. In between here in Montana. Yep, South North Dakota actually, but it could be South Dakota. So this is on our trip up next. And this is actually the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And but I just Ryan and for seeing a new when you get up west of the Mississippi, you have these huge horizons and the great big sky, and I think it's a great metaphor for us to think about the vision that we can see, as we try and think about things in new ways and see the open possibilities, and that's sort of what you experience on Sabbatical too, is these opening of all these great possibilities. So that's the image there that I started with. So I'll start with this quote from Psalm 23. I'm sure many of you know it and even know it by heart. And I thought this was a really fitting way to focus the sabbatical time. Maybe if you can see it, we'll all read it together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. When you hear that part of the song, what do you think about, or what things come to mind, or what does that mean for you? Does anyone want to share some thoughts about how that psalm speaks to you even this morning?
I grew up on a dairy farm. And
oh, sorry. I guess we could do have a microphone. Sorry, and I could repeat it if it's. I threw off our AV text by not letting them know that you're here.
Okay, can you hear me now? Better? Okay, I'm Catherine. I grew up on a dairy farm, and the idea of green spaces and green pastures has always been restorative to me. It's been a place of where the cows go out to graze, where they are getting rejuvenated, they're getting grass, they're getting sunshine. And I think that this passage has always been particularly reminiscent for me of thinking about my time on those 240 acres with so much great space.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Thank you. Anyone else want to reflect on these verses? Yeah, Tom.
Well, it's the song.
Yeah,
it's the restorative power of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Well, you can think about it. I love both of those images, and with that picture of the prairie and there were buffalo, you probably couldn't see them in that picture. I have another picture where you'll see some buffalo, but the grazing on the grass and thinking about how both green pastures and still waters restore us. We need that sustenance, but also that it's the Lord who is our shepherd, who is leading us in those places, and that our true renewal comes from that fact that we are grounded in this gift of a relationship with God through Jesus that reconciles us, that as you have heard or preview for what you might hear in the sermon today, that there is grace for that as we receive freedom in Christ, and that we have our souls restored. And I think that is really a beautiful image. And that's what I tried to take through my sabbatical as well, that we all need our souls restored, that we can, do things for our physical bodies, whether it's, exercise or eating right. We can do things for our minds, but our souls are an integral part of who we are. That as we think about our interconnectedness of ourselves, our physical, our emotional, our spiritual, that they all bear on one another, and that when we remember that we are grounded in that reconciled relationship with God through Christ, we have our souls restored. And that's part of what I experienced on the sabbatical as well. Nancy, we have a microphone. Yep. Okay.
Nancy, you know that. I know who you are. But the longer we're focused on this, the more I feel more what's happening around the world, where it's hard for people's souls to be restored. The devastation in Mexico with that unexpected hurricane, where 80% of the buildings of that tourist town of Acapulco are totally destroyed, and then Gaza, and I mean, it's just when people are living with such devastation, then how does one imagine the green pastures? And how does one get one's soul restored? I mean, that is really a conundrum. It's more than a conundrum, is it not? I mean, and it's fabulous that you had the sabbatical. I'm not saying that. But it just, as I look at that more and more, this is what I'm also thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I think that's a really powerful comment, and we're all experiencing that, I think, grief and that worry and anxiety that's been happening in our world. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that more too, but I think that it's a real contrast even from our daily lives that seem so easy and well provisioned, but so by comparison. Yeah. Tyrone?
Yes, just to pick up where both you and Nancy have, for me personally, when I was in high school, my parents moved to an acreage, and I used to come home from school, and right in our backyard was a beautiful creek, woods, and I could just feel any anxiety that had come up to the day release, and nature actually, the setting gave for me a sense of security and peace, and it actually helped me. And memory is one of the great gifts that we have, and that when we face what Nancy is talking about, it gives me greater perspective to try to help other people, and it gives me a greater sense of security and such.
Yeah, thanks, Tyrone. I think I don't know the quotes. One of you might. We do have a few pastors or people who have worked in the church for a while around here, but Martin Luther talked about how creation also witnesses to God's love and grace, and there's that the word of God is only in Jesus, but there's a sense that we experience that in nature, and I think that's really healing. And as a church, we're learning more and more about that we have neglected for so long, and we're also seeing some of the impacts of that. But I think that's really wonderful, and I think that restorative experience, the hope is then it helps us to go out into those hurting places and find ways to bring restoration or comfort or accompaniment to those people who are experiencing things that we are not, so that we can bring that light and that relief to them as well. So thanks, Tyrone. So sabbaticals, there's different kinds of sabbaticals that you've probably encountered or experienced, and that we know about. And a pastoral sabbatical is sort of unique, and I want to share a little bit about that. The idea of Sabbath, of course, originally comes from Genesis, from the story of creation, where after God saw that all that God had created over 6 days was good, on the seventh day God rested, and that becomes the model or the impetus for Sabbath, for rest. And then we hear in the Ten Commandments that God's people were told to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And that meant to remember that day on which we give thanks for all that God has given to us. We use that day for rest and the renewal of our souls. And so that is where we understand this idea of Sabbath, that it's a weekly rhythm, that it's not something that only happens once every, number of years, but every week we need that renewal, that reminder, that call to gratitude. And part of that is then that there was also a year of Jubilee, which came, every 50 years, where there was something even much greater that was restored. But that weekly rhythm of the Sabbath. And then Jesus reinterprets the Sabbath a little bit in the writings and the work of the Pharisees and others. The Sabbath actually became fairly prescribed, and there were all sorts of rules about what you could and couldn't do. And Jesus came in to sort of free the Sabbath in a sense from that had constricted its purpose and its meaning, to say the Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath. And this is in response to criticism of his healing or of his disciples finding food and sustenance on the Sabbath, to say that those kinds of things that bring renewal and relief and comfort and sustenance to people are things that the Sabbath is all about. And so Jesus said, it wasn't that humankind was made to honor the Sabbath and follow these rules, but the Sabbath was made to bring humankind life. And so that's what we get as our source for this understanding of Sabbath or sabbatical. In this community, certainly we know about academic sabbaticals at the UW and in other places. In my understanding, and I'm not an academic, and some of you could help me, but those are generally, there needs to be a purpose and often an outcome or a product that happens during those times. They can be longer, but they're also not designed as simply rest. There's often a process and a production that happens. Is that sort of accurate, that there's a work product that the university or whatever says needs to be accomplished? Businesses are also offering sabbaticals, especially many of us know Epic and their gift of a sabbatical after I think it's about 5 years of work that they offer to pay for and share a new experience, often a travel experience for their employees. And so I think in other places, people are recognizing that need for an extended break. And in the church, the idea of Sabbath for pastors, a sabbatical, has grown over the years of my ministry. When I first started, I was grateful that there had been people who had already worked on that, and Midvale has had that policy of a Sabbath since well before I started here, which is a real wonderful gift that this congregation offers, and it's becoming much more common. But a pastoral sabbatical is really a season of Sabbath, a prolonged rest. So it's not intended necessarily to have any outcome or any production, and it's designed really to inhabit and inherit that traditional biblical understanding of rest and renewal, for which I'm very grateful. And I think it's needed now more than ever for pastors. And I don't want to say that pastors are the only people. Certainly we have seen in the world in the last number of years, a number of professions that are experiencing severe burnout and stress. A lot of people in medical and healthcare professions, certainly even our teachers and other people have experienced this over the last number of years. But it is part of what pastors have really struggled with. Barna is a Christian research organization, show that pastors are struggling with burnout at unprecedented levels. In March of 2022, the percentage of pastors who have considered quitting full-time ministry within the last year was 42%, which is, almost half. And that shows you sort of the stress that people are experiencing in our work and our calling as pastors. And that's from a New York Times article from 2000. I mistyped that. It should say 2022. I missed a 2 there. Sorry about that. It just seems like sometimes I feel like there's no way we could be in those years. I mean, am I that old? Like, I remember when I was growing up, 2000 seemed like forever. You would never get to change that 19 to a 20, and now we're 2023. Sorry about that. The Lilly Foundation, which is a group that does offer grants for sabbaticals for congregations and pastors together, has found over their years of offering these grants that sabbaticals do strengthen congregations and pastors together. And they found a lot of benefit that both the congregation and the pastor are revitalized and renewed. It also contributes to more longer-term pastorates, which generally support the health and vitality of congregations rather than pastors turning over regularly, which often means there's a time of sort of fallowness and then a restart and things happen. And so, and Midvale certainly is a witness to the fruitfulness of long-term pastorates, from the founding pastor, Sig Sandrock, to Pastor Clevey, and then Pastor Tollefson was here for, I think, 10 years. Pastor Bruce was here for many years, and now Pastor Katie and I think you can sense that there is a real benefit in that kind of long-term relationship and connection. And I know I feel it, and I'm grateful for the relationships that I've been able to build and grow in my time here at Midvale. So some of the things that constitute a pastoral sabbatical: an extended leave from ordinary work, period of rest for mind, body, and soul, a time for renewal and development of relationships with God and others. And these are things that sound sort of, especially the last one, well, shouldn't you be doing that? But as a pastor, when you're leading worship, when you're caring for other people's relationships and faith, it often means that you don't have the time to focus on your own relationship and spirituality as much as you might like to. For example, when you're leading worship, you're thinking about, okay, when do I stand up and do the next part, or is the music going to come in? And unfortunately, you don't get to enter into it. And so throughout the year, we try to find opportunities for worship at clergy gatherings or other things like that. But and I'm not going to say that I don't really appreciate and find meaningful the worship here, because I certainly do, and I love that, and it does feed me. But there's a sense that this break gives you a time to really turn and focus on your own relationship with God and with others. And as a pastor, without having weekends, you don't get the chances to visit family or do other kinds of experiences that some people do. And not to say that there aren't a lot of professions now that work nights and weekends. Our world has changed over the years. But so those are some of the things that I've found really helpful. And so I want to, before I get into some of the details of what I experienced, I want to say thank you. And I had a typo in the top, and Pastor Katie said, you should just keep that because it sounds good. Does anyone see the typo? I was going to say gratitude for the grace given. Okay, so you're the gratitude now because you've experienced it. So I left it there. So there it is. But I do say thank you to all of you and to the leaders who preceded you that created this culture in Midvale that recognizes the importance of rest and of a life that is centered and grounded. Thank you to the council and the congregation, especially thanks to Pastor Katie and Pastor Ken who filled in and did extra work during the time when I was away, and to the whole Midvale staff who did a lot, to Pam and others I know who are really we have a terrific staff, and everyone is always ready to support and help one another, and I'm really grateful for that, and it wouldn't have gone as well as it had without the great staff that we have. And so some people said, I didn't even know you were gone. And then there were others who said, are you again? So let me go to some of the things that we did. And I find it ironic and sort of bittersweet that this is the first slide that I'm going to show you. And this is actually a reenactment of a picture from 2018, which was also the first slide of my sabbatical presentation last time. So at the beginning of my sabbatical in 2018, the first thing we did as a family was go to the Taylor Swift concert. And our daughters are great Swiftie fans, and luckily they've introduced us, and I really think there's a lot of powerful and good connections that Taylor Swift makes in her music to connect with people as they experience the ups and downs of life, and that they're still willing to take their parents with them. Something like that is also a real gift. But I think this phenomenon of Taylor Swift partly is a phenomenon of coming back from all of the struggles that we had during the pandemic. That it was 5 years until you could do something like this again is really sort of meaningful, but also sad that we had this huge gap, and going back to these concerts and celebrating was really an opportunity to say we've made it through this really hard time during the pandemic, and we can get together and do things like that again. So I got to go to Taylor Swift at Soldiers Field again with my daughters. It was a great experience. There's a picture of the big screen. Taylor Swift, you can see a little tiny person there from where we were sitting. So some of the things I'm going to focus on first are some rest and renewal things that we got to do. As part of it was spending time with our daughters. Sigrid was home all summer. Christina was in the Twin Cities for a lot of the summer, but came back at different times. And so to do things with them was a real joy. How many of you knew the Madison Parks had ping pong tables in the parks that you could play on? They're fantastic. And we brought our own paddles and ping pong balls, but they do have a bag that has those there. So this is at Renewal Park, and in case that's maybe a little cold this year, but it was just such a joy to not think about anything, be out there in the outside playing ping pong and just letting your mind rest. Biking with my daughter Christina. I did a lot of biking this summer. I'm normally a runner for exercise, but I've had an Achilles injury that's been nagging, so I've had to try other things, and so I really worked on discovering biking. And there are so many amazing places to bike around Madison that it's been a real great experience, and getting to do some of that with Christina. But being outside, being active, and just finding sort of things that you don't have to think about a lot to do were really a gift for me. And if anyone has any questions as we go through, feel free to raise your hand and ask, and we can talk about whatever you like. Some of the other things, went to the 4th of July fireworks at Ray Stevens Field. Enjoyed that. Got to spend time with my mom and Christina in the Twin Cities for some more extended periods of time, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I had been working over the summer. Christina was doing a summer shadowing and work in St. Paul, and this is her house that she shared with about 4 other college students, and then my mom. So I got to take my mom down and see Christina's house. My mom lives in a northern suburb of the Twin Cities, and so that was a real fun experience to get to do some of those kinds of things and spend some more extended time with them, even though they weren't living in Madison. So I really appreciated that experience as well. One of the things I worked on was cooking and doing some new experiences. And one of the things we've been doing, Katie and I, is trying to cook more vegetarian, and to do that for a number of reasons, least of which is probably health, as you can see by the cheese and other things on there. But that is part of it, I think, but also just in terms of caring for creation and using less resources and finding ways to find good foods. And so there's like a chickpea and cheese and tomato and basil salad, some zucchini tacos, and then my favorite was this roasted pepper and onion and goat cheese sandwich that we enjoyed while we were watching the Mad City ski team on Lake Monona in one of their weekly Sunday night ski shows, and having a picnic. There's something you notice, 2 of these 3 pictures are outdoors. There's something about eating outside, and I actually tried to eat as much of my meals outside as I could all summer. I think I ate every breakfast out on our back patio. There's just something about that makes the food taste even better. So we did try. I did experiment with trying to find some good tasting vegetarian recipes, and we've been working on moving in that direction. Not that we don't eat meat, but we are working in that direction. I got to go to my family reunion. This was the William family on my mom's side, and we hadn't had a reunion in a number of years, and this was on a Saturday in the Twin Cities, and of course I wouldn't have been able to go if I had been preaching or been able to do that. And this was just my mom's siblings and their children and grandchildren. You can see the big group there, but it was a real joy to connect and see some people I hadn't seen for years. Many of them, you sort of keep up with on Facebook, but there is something about seeing people in person and connecting in that way that was really meaningful. But it was, what do they call this? I don't know if this phrase is still used anymore, a bit of a busman's holiday, in the sense that I did a baptism, but I was grateful to do that. One of my cousin's daughters had not been baptized because of the pandemic, and so you can see on the left there, that's right after the baptism, and so that was a real joy to share in that and experience that baptism in this family gathering of the church, of the family of God. So that was a really great opportunity. And then also this summer, this wasn't at the same time, but the tombstone is from my grandparents' grave in rural southern Minnesota. Arendal is the place where that is, and the cemetery is surrounded by cornfields on all sides, and it's a couple miles from where my grandpa's grandfather settled when they moved here from Norway in the 1800s, and so there's still a farm in our family there, and then the cemetery, and it's one of these small cemeteries, and it's one of these cemeteries where half of the tombstones say William on them. And so you know that there were a lot of that family that were in that area for a long period of time. So it was nice to have that reconnection and honor that family history that I was able to do during the summertime. One of the other wonderful rest and renewal things that we did was visit Grand Teton National Park with our daughter Sigrid. It was just the two of us on this trip, and earlier I had taken Christina on a trip to the Boundary Waters, and so I got to take Sigrid on her own sort of wilderness experience, which we both really like to do. And so we went to Grand Teton National Park. Some of you may remember sometime in September I talked about this hike that we did to this lake right beneath the Grand Teton. You can see the glacial water color of that lake, and this was the lake where there wasn't a trail to it, so you had to make your own way and find your own path. And it was a reminder that you do have to pay attention as you're going along and think about what path you're following, because there were so many people who went to this lake because it was so beautiful that there were all sorts of little trails that started and ended and started and stopped, and you really couldn't trust the people who've gone before you necessarily. You better trust your vision and your compass and your other senses. And so it's a reminder of in our life's journey, where do we put our trust, and what pathway are we on, and what are our guideposts or our grounding places that's helped us show us the way to go. So that was just a spectacular place and a spectacular trip to experience with Sigrid, while camping in the Tetons and doing some of these hikes. Here's a buffalo that we got up close to. You can see out the car window, this is Jackson Lake in the Tetons, and you can see just what a beautiful and stunning thing is. And I didn't have the courage to swim in that cold water, but Sigrid did. So you can see her swimming there. She's got a very good tolerance for cold. She loves swimming in the cold. One of the first things she will do at spring break is go swimming in Lake Mendota from Spring Harbor Beach, even though it's March or April and not very warm yet. So here's a couple of other things that I wanted to just highlight. I did, stop and smell the roses, so to speak. I looked at lots of different flowers. This was some lilies on a hike that we did that I had never done before, but just noticing all of the beauty and nature around us and all the flowers and things that we see just in our daily lives. And then I contrasted to the picture on the left. What do you think those are on the left there? Any guess what those two square things are? They look sort of like flower beds, don't they? And it looks sort of like some nice dirt in there. At least that's what I thought when we were getting out of the car at this rest stop in eastern Montana, that they must just not have planted the flowers yet or something. And then you get close. What's that? It's not a pet area. They actually put blacktop in each of those squares. So it was sort of a contrast to say this person needed a sabbatical because they just gave up. They were not going to try and keep flowers in these flower boxes anymore, and they just paved them over. And so it was a bit of a depressing sight. Because literally, when you walk in the distance, it looks like this nice, rich soil that is just waiting for something, and then you get there and you see someone gave it over. So it reminded me that we do need rest, and we need to remember that there's always a chance for growth and green. And I was just sad for that. Yeah. Another thing, the second thing that I want to talk about after rest is sort of seeing things anew. I hinted at that a little bit by looking at the things around us in nature and other places that are beautiful. One of the things I did was start repping. I actually am cheating a little bit because I started repping before Sabbatical began, but it was one of the things that I tried to do new after our
daughters both got out of the house and went to college, and give back because there's always a need for soccer referees and they always are looking for more. So I went through the training and passed the test and became a soccer referee. And so I really have enjoyed doing that mostly, although I did have one coach this couple weeks ago who was not very nice to me. So somewhere in there from one of the local high schools. But overall, people have been very gracious, especially the players themselves are always say thank you, and they really seem to mean it, that they know that they're really glad you're there. And so that's really been a great experience, but it's something totally new that I, had never done before. And it was, a real risk to take it, to go out there and be a referee and hope you're doing a good job. And so I think that challenge of trying something new is a way that we always keep growing in life. And if we can, it's always helpful to try new things, to challenge ourselves, to go to the edges sometimes. So you can't do this all the time, but when you're on a sabbatical, especially, you have that greater source of reserves to say, I can go to the edge of my comfort zones a little bit because I know I'm going to be okay and I can do that. So that was what I did. And then I had to throw in, of course, the picture of the only fan who's ever come for the cheer for the referee. This is my brother-in-law Tim's son Odin, and they came to one of my games to cheer for the referee. So that's a new experience. So sometimes even the referee has a fan. One of the big pieces of my sabbatical was to go on a Knowles backpacking trip. Knowles stands for National Outdoor Leadership School, and Knowles is based in Lander, Wyoming. And about 2 decades ago or a little more, I worked on one of their sort of real courses. It was intensive, a little over 2-week backpacking trip that helps you both with wilderness skills, but then uses those skills to learn other leadership and life skills. And then after you go through one of their real courses, they also have full semester courses for college age people and so on. You can go on one of their alumni trips, which is sort of Knowles light. And so that's what I did this summer in Italy. Went on a backpacking trip in the southern part of the Alps, and they used it again to help people with leadership, decision making, risk management, team function, and those kinds of things. But it's also just a really wonderful experience. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this trip is it gave me a new view of wilderness and nature. Most of my wilderness experiences have been in the United States, Boundary Waters, Rockies, and other places where wilderness really is set apart, and it's not a place where people live. It's often viewed to true wilderness has to be pristine and no man or human-made marks on it and so on. And I think in some ways that's really wonderful and beautiful that we have these places, that we know that nature continues as it has without as much impact from human efforts. But I also think in some ways it diminishes our accountability and our calling to care for the nature that's all around us. And it sort of reminds or helps us to forget that we are a part of nature as well. And so part of what I liked about this experience is the Alps, of course, have been inhabited for years. There's all sorts of signs of human habitation, but I think that closer connection with nature has given them a chance to really think about how do we care for creation and how do we value this earth that we've been given in different ways, because it's all around us and it's right here, and it's not something distant that maybe we'll visit once in a while. And so this is the top of one of the mountains that we hiked to, and there's a chapel there to give thanks to God and to pray for safety for the community. And so there's a sense that our lives are integrated more into nature. And certainly there are good and bad of both of those, but I think that understanding that we are a part of nature, that we need to see and care for it right around us in our gardens, in our yards, in our cities, as well as in those more pristine, quote unquote, places is really important to think about. Here you can see some of the backpacking, and you can see some sheep. I thought that was appropriate on a pastoral sabbatical to walk by those sheep. And a lot of it was actually deciduous forest, which I haven't backpacked in the mountains, which is unusual. Normally you're up in the pine or above tree line. And, you saw all sorts of things. This cross was an old World War I bunker that had been turned into a memorial. And so you see some of the mixture of experiences that have happened over the years there too. So it makes you remember some of that history and also the things that have gone before. So that was a really meaningful experience for me. The trip started in Turin, Italy, Torino, we might call it also. And so one of the things, the cathedral there is where the Shroud of Turin is, which is considered in the Roman Catholic Church the burial cloth of Jesus. And, we don't know for sure if that is what Jesus might have been wrapped in, but you can see the image on the left of the face with the thorns and so on there. That's a replica. They only take it out once a year for people to see. But when we were there, it was really meaningful to see whether or not it was real, and even, this is a reproduction, that way that people interacted, and it helped in their spiritual life and faith. And I really appreciated the prayer that they had with it in the cathedral, that I think is so meaningful, especially as we talked about some of the things that are happening today too. And I'll just read it. It says, "O God, our Father, the figure of the shroud sends us back to the sufferings inflicted on your Son, Jesus, who has taken on himself the sorrows of every human being. Help us to see him in every person, to serve him and proclaim his love, and give us the joy of contemplating the radiant face of the risen Jesus, who lives and reigns with you forever and ever. Amen." And I thought, whatever we think about the historicity or anything else, when we think about that shroud and we think about Jesus, there's no better way to think about it than to remember that Jesus has taken on the sorrows of all of us, sorrows of people in Acapulco or in Gaza or Israel or in Ukraine, and has taken on our sorrows, and that we also can see him in every person, and that we are called to proclaim that love to all people. And I just thought that's really at the heart of what we see in the suffering of Christ on the cross, and that then motivates us. And then it doesn't stop there, though, because it reminds us of the glory of the resurrection and that radiant face of the risen Christ that calls out our hope and our promise. So that was really meaningful for me. And then some other ways that I saw anew, I got to borrow some kayaks, and I see Madison from the water, which is actually a really different experience. I mean, we've never had a boat. We've never really been much out on the waters, and it does look very different to see the city from the water. So that was really cool. We tried to do some other things that I had never done in 20 plus years of living in Madison. So we did this hike. Does anyone recognize where that hike is? It's less than an hour away from here. Yeah, Murphy's Glen, exactly. So, and that was just a stunning place, and we had never been there. You can see Sigrid here, and to give you a sense of the scale for how big those rock formations are. So, there were just some wonderful things that we can see anew right around us that we take for granted or have never seen or experienced. We've never been to the International Crane Foundation. And I don't know if they're here now, but one of our people in the brass group, the Morks, we saw them when we were there, and they had never been there either. And so they're I hope it's okay for me to share that. But and so their whole family was there. So that was really a neat experience. And that Crane Foundation, if you haven't been, is a really inspiring place to go. They have every kind of known species of crane in the world. They work across the globe to protect and restore crane habitat and cranes. And of course, the original story, do you know how it was started in trying to redo the whooping crane population? And they were able to have a breeding pair of whooping cranes produce a child. And the researcher from here, from the Madison area, dressed like a whooping crane and helped raise that crane by becoming a crane themselves in that baby crane's eyes. And eventually that became this program where now they continue to, they'll put on the crane suits so that they don't identify, or what do you call it, imprint on humans, but imprint on cranes. And they would use ultra lights to then take the cranes and show them where they should migrate to, because of course they've never done that. And it's a remarkable success story. And of course, as a pastor, you can't help but think about the realities of the connection with what God did in Christ, becoming one of us so that we might see the path to reconciliation and new life in our lives. I mean, it's just such a beautiful metaphor for that, and a different way of understanding how you become like that which you want to save, and that's what God did in Christ. They have these peace cranes there, which I thought were beautiful. That whole idea of peace cranes I read came from the original understanding years ago that cranes would live to be 1,000 years old, and so they would have these 1,000 crane displays throughout Japan and other places, and now they're just used as a symbol of that hope and well wishes and prayers for peace. And so I thought that was a really beautiful piece of art that lifted us beyond what was right in front of us too. So the Crane Foundation was another new thing. This was another great experience. I went to St. Olaf College. Our daughter is also there. And while I was at St. Olaf, I had a opportunity to take a semester abroad, and St. Olaf is known as one of the colleges that has the highest percentage of their students who study away during their time on campus. And they are committed to that because it does give people a new perspective and helps to see the world in a different way, and also see your own culture in a different way. But we had an interesting experience in that I went on the global semester, and so we had 4 main countries where we visited over the semester plus the January term. And halfway through our trip, our professor one day was no longer there, and the director of the International Studies office was with us. And I was, an oblivious boy in college, but our professor, who had been leading the trip, had been sexually harassing some of the students on the group. And of course, when you're in a certain place, it's not that hard. You have to, the policy is you separate the person who's been accused from those who are feeling vulnerable. When you're in India, it's a little harder to do that. But the study abroad group at St. Olaf was very careful and communicated with our families, and sent the director of the office to come to be with us for about a week until we could have this person, who is just one of the best people I've ever known in the world, Matt Gimsey, join us. He was an art professor at the school who had led this trip before, and his daughter also came with. So he sort of saved our group and saved our trip and let us continue. And he was honored at the college this last year for his work, mostly in art, but also especially in creating community at the college. And his whole work in colleagueship and community building was highlighted. And it was also where they dedicated the sculpture that he had created and its installation on campus. And it's called Striving for Peace on Horizon's Brim. And Matt Gimsey was commissioned many years in a row for providing artwork for the Peace Prize forums that brought Nobel Peace Prize laureates to the Lutheran colleges in Minnesota. And so he was the one who created a gift for each of the laureates when they would come. And so this work sort of is a fruition of some of that lifelong commitment to peace and justice. And it's just a beautiful sculpture that it is interactive. It's got a dove on the top. You can see that also from a different angle. It looks like a heart that spins, and it's got a world in the middle and a part below it that invites people to turn it to get interactive with the artwork. And it was just a really wonderful experience to see his vision, and that it was that art really can help to inspire us, I think, in ways when we see some of, like we've talked about, the troubles of the world, that we need that inspiration. And so it was really great to see him. I hadn't actually seen him in person since our trip, and so that was really phenomenal. And this is another person who was on our trip with a picture there from 1992-93 was when we did that. And I think it was also fitting the college put it at the edge of their natural lands, at the edge of campus, with all these restored natural lands and also their windmill, because it really emphasizes sort of the ways that we need to go in the future to bring peace, and knowing that we are really just, it's on the brim, it's on the horizon, but we're not where we need to be yet. So And then I guess I'll close with just a few books that I read over the time that I thought did give me some new perspectives too. On the far left is Circe, which is a figure in the Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, and the story of Odysseus, but it's written from the perspective of this woman who was I don't know what you would call it in Greek mythology, a demigod or a nymph or something like that anyway. And it gives you a very different perspective of the story of the Odyssey. And the author wrote it with the intention of taking these often one-dimensional women characters and trying to center our perspective on what it would be like and for a woman who was actually a very caring, powerful, and important part of that story. And what is it like to see it from that perspective versus the perspective that we normally see in these ancient stories and even up till today of the male-dominated certain type of power that draws the narrative. And so that was really interesting for me. Americana is a novel about a Nigerian immigrant who comes to the United States and what it is like to have that kind of experience. And then also the main character in this novel, it's a fiction, writes a blog about what it's like to be a Black African in the United States and also compare it to the other experiences of different groups within the US. And so it really opened me up to see things in ways that I never personally obviously experienced. So that was really good. Ordinary Blessings is just a book of different poems and prayers of very different things. So you sort of look at ordinary things in new ways. So like some of the blessings in this book, and it's by Maida Herrick Carlson, who's a ELCA pastor from Minnesota, are blessings for the bus stop, for your car, for walking through doors, for paying bills, for laundry, for a sleepless night, for righteous anger, for the courage to say no, for a breakup, for a new diagnosis, and those kinds of things. And so I thought I found this really interesting. It gave you a new perspective to look at various experiences that we have in our everyday lives and how we might think about them and lift them up to God. There is one, of course, called For Rest that I will read to you now as I think about my sabbatical, and a reminder that it isn't just something that we do in once in our life. But so the For Rest blessing goes: the world hustles and benefits from a cruel lie. Idleness must be earned. It is reserved for the privilege to have achieved some success, a reward only after everything has been given or taken. But our bodies and souls know better. They remember the seventh day of creation, the generation of rest, the rhythm of a holy pause before there could be more living. When we rest, we call out the lie for the sake of those fooled into thinking they are too powerful to rest, for the sake of those who are unsafe when they pause for peace. When we rest, we can remember it is not a reward, but an essential beat, for in our stopping, we witness what God is doing inside and way beyond us. So just a sample from that, but I thought that was really good. And then the last one I'll put up there is Decolonizing Palestine. It's the most recent book by Pastor and Dr. Mitri Rahab, who is the president of the Lutheran College in Bethlehem. And it really addresses a lot of the context of what we're experiencing today in that area. And so it really is a call, especially for the West and the Christian church, to look at how it views the Holy Land and Palestine. So much of what we see is Jewish and Muslim conflict, forgetting the Christian presence, and also, of course, forgetting the common humanity that we all share. And so he does a powerful job of theologically working through some of those things. And so I found that really moving and meaningful. I will just mention, I sent a note out this week. Many of you know we are working on a trip to the Holy Land in March. And some of you are in this room, I think, are possibly going on that. And I've been working with Elias Tours over this time period. And right now we are sort of watching and waiting. There is still a potential that we will be able to go if there's a real ceasefire that takes hold in the next month or so. It could actually be a very safe time to go after that, and also a time where the Christians in Palestine would very much appreciate our presence. But we are only going to go if it's safe and if we know for sure that we'll be able to have a good experience there and be able to do the things that would be meaningful. And so if that doesn't happen, we're working on some other possibilities. The tour company has been very good to work with. They're offered an alternative so that if we're not able to go, we would switch to a Footsteps of Paul tour for the same dates, and they would give us the same price, which would go to Greece and Turkey, which I think is one of the places and things that I've always wanted to do, but have not done. So that might be a good option for us. We can also postpone to a future date, and they're willing to allow anyone to withdraw and have no penalty. They'll fully refund the fee, which is, I think, one of the only tour companies that I know of that's actually doing that. So I'm grateful for that. So keep our group in our prayers, but of course, more importantly, keep the people in Gaza and Palestine and Israel in our prayers. And we maybe feel helpless, but I do believe prayers help. You can also make donations through ELCA Disaster Response. You can advocate. The ELCA has advocacy emails, and other groups do as well, that we can reach out to Congress and the President and Secretary of State to work for a ceasefire and other things. So that's part of what I'm working on right now too. So I don't have I talked, I only had like 22 slides. I didn't think I could do it. But do you have, and the choir already had to leave, but do you have any questions? We've got a few minutes for questions or comments or anything you'd like to share with me. I'd be glad to hear about that.
Is there anything you didn't do during your sabbatical that you wish you could have done?
Anything I didn't do? That's a really good question. What did, I think one of the things I was thinking I would do more is visit other churches and worship in other places. In the previous sabbatical, I had done that quite a bit, and I didn't do that very much this sabbatical. So that would be the one thing that I sort of had as a thing that I thought I would like to do, but it just felt more burdensome than rejuvenating. So I didn't end up doing that. So that's a good question. Yeah, thanks.
I just wanted to go back to the Crane Foundation, when you were talking about how they were able to, what is it, about 800 whooping cranes now in the country, and then we were down to like a pair or two. But one of the members of Midvale, who is now deceased, Marion Doherty, was one of the people early on who wore one of the adult crane garbs and would work with the what do you call the little baby one?
Great.
But yeah, she did that for quite a while and did a presentation in well, we used to call it the couples club, that it became Midvalers. So she did a presentation for her outfit and demonstrated what they did. So I was reminded of that when you
Makes sense. Yeah, you can see a picture of that on their website. And
a question occurred to me from my own experience that when there's a change of life for a while, like a sabbatical, for me, it helped heighten my awareness of other aspects which were going on in the world, because one becomes so involved in what one is doing. Did you experience?
yeah, I think you do sort of get this opportunity to see beyond your sort of narrow focus of, this is what I need to do for my work and get these jobs done. You can explore, and that was some of the reading that I did too, was, things that I wouldn't ever necessarily read for my work, or as articles or different experiences like that, to see a broader cross section of what's actually going on in your own little area. So yeah, I definitely experienced that. I do. I think one of the things that it gave me back again, and that gets sometimes worn out of you, is curiosity. That you have that more openness to follow a question or to ask something that you sometimes might have felt, well, I don't have time to do that, or I've got to get this done, or this is my focus, and that's not really part of what I'm doing. So I think it gave me renewed experience and focus on curiosity too. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to comment on how joyful you look throughout this presentation. And I'm so thrilled for you. And it makes me realize that you have, in me, you have shared this with us in a way that makes me think about my own personal sabbatical, no matter where you are in your lifespan. Now, even in my retirement, I can still experience sabbatical.
Thank you, Nan. Thank you. Well, yeah, Tom, maybe that'll be our last one. Thanks.
Like, I know a lot of young people get rejuvenated at a Taylor Swift conference. I mean, what do you call it?
Yep.
And I'm delighted that you as well could have that same experience. And I wonder if you would describe what you felt at the Taylor Swift.
Well, I mean, there was just so much energy in that group, and I mean, I did feel a little out of place. I mean, it's predominantly young people, and then the parents who go. Usually, it's women, but there were quite a few other dads who had different T-shirts there that they were going with. And I did not know all the words. Everyone around me sung along the whole time, so there's a little bit of feeling out of place, which was good. But just sharing in that energy and positivity of the time, and everyone was very affirming and friendly, and it was a great experience. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, everyone. I'm gonna get ready to
I don't think so. I thought if I aimed it this way, maybe you'd have a little better chance.